Do you like playing spellcasters in your RPGs? How about assassins? Ever tried both in the same character? I'm not talking about a gishy weapon user who stabs but also has spells. I'm talking someone who assassinates with their spells, and only their spells. If that sounds fun or interesting, then I would keep watching if I were you. Welcome to D4. Hey everybody, so here at D4, each week we take a deep dive into character builds for our favorite role-playing games. I like to crunch numbers about them, theorycraft about them, not so that I can tell you the right way or the best way to play a certain character, but to explore one potential way to build something that's both powerful but also really fun to play in game. So if you enjoy creating characters for your role-playing games almost as much as you enjoy playing the actual game itself, or if you're just looking for tips or ideas on how to build something that you're thinking about playing, then welcome home. This is where you belong, and I am so glad that you're here. I really am, so thanks for watching. My name's Colby. I put out build videos every Tuesday, and if you like what I do, I would really appreciate it if you would consider subscribing to the channel and maybe even joining as a member of the channel. There's a little button down there that says join. For a few bucks a month, you can get access to the library of write-ups that I create for these builds to help you recreate them in-game more easily, as well as access to our Discord server and even access to our monthly Q&A hangout sessions that we do with our members. I just recorded a new one yesterday, actually. So yes, huge shout out and thank you to my channel members. I could not do this without you guys, truly. And for everybody else, I couldn't do this without you either. Thanks for just being here and watching. I really appreciate you. I truly do. Right, so a couple of weeks ago, I was reviewing my burst damage builds for my ranking my builds video, Nova version, right? Watch it here if you'd like. When I got to the flamethrower build, this build, there was something about it that kind of bugged me, namely how bonus action heavy it was, making it a little less useful for Nova purposes, as it would require some setup before you could really burst. But also, I realized that there were some things in the game, one of them newish, one of them a little older actually, that I could potentially take advantage of to really improve the burst damage capabilities of the build. I'll get to the new one once I start the build proper, but as for the old one, yeah. I mean, I love the Assassin subclass for rogues in D&D 5e. I suppose it's all those years playing as a rogue in World of Warcraft, but there's just something so fun about sneaking up on an enemy and getting a huge burst of damage on them when they never even knew you were there that I just love to play with in role-playing games. But what I never really considered until recently anyways is this. The premier feature of the Assassinate, the thing that tells us that all of our hits are automatic criticals if our enemy is surprised, right? It works on more than just weapon attacks. I always envision the rogue like sneaking up and sticking a well-placed dagger or short sword into their enemy's back when they're not looking. But the wording on the ability simply says that we have advantage on attack rolls against enemies who haven't gone in combat yet, and any hit we score against surprised enemies is a critical. Nothing in there about weapons. It just has to be an attack. When I realized this recently, I immediately started thinking, what if we tried to find the best ways to add damage to attacks that didn't necessarily have to be weapon attacks and combined them into one amazing, like, Arcane Assassin? The build today is the result of that quest. That said, a word of warning, I'm not actually going to get to rogue levels on this build until several levels in. You could, of course, go a different route if you wanted to with this concept. As someone beholden to the spreadsheet like myself, building this character for burst damage like I am, it just makes more sense for us, numbers-wise, to start with a few, yes, a few, other classes first. But if you really wanted to lean into the assassin archetype right from the get-go, you totally could. The build would still work great. It would have more utility and sneakiness early on, but the burst damage numbers would lag behind until a bit later, which is totally fine. Anyways, preamble done. I proudly present D&D build number 154. I'm not going to call this Flamethrower 2.0. There's way too much that's different about this build to call it that, I think. So instead, let's go with like the Assassin Mage, or the Spell Shadow, the Spell Stalker, the Scrivener Assassin, the Deadly Librarian, Fahrenheit 451, the Arcane Shadow. Those are all fantastic options. Big thanks to the Discord members for the suggestions for this one, but I think I'm going with the Stealth Bomber. here. Huge thanks to my good friend Randall Hampton for the fantastic artwork that he put out for this build. He does this for all of my builds. He's an amazing artist. If you would like to follow him on social media to see the other stuff that he's checked out, or to maybe try and commission him to create some art for your character or even your whole party, I will put links in the video description on how to do so, as always. But first, a word from the sponsor this week, Magic Spoon, and I am so excited to have them as a sponsor again, because that means more yummy cereal for me. And check it out, they even have now like these custom made like magic bowls that are like flexible, dishwasher safe, cool looking, and magic spoons. Ooh, that's so pretty. Perfectly optimized for cereal lovers like myself, and I'm guessing you. You can order them from their website if they're not sold out. But the cereal is the main thing here. For those who haven't heard yet, Magic Spoon is like the best cereal because it only has 4 to 5 grams of net carbs, which is so low for cereal, and like 13, 14 grams of protein per serving, which is so high for cereal. If you are considering going for like a lower carb, higher protein kind of diet, like I often tend to do, but you don't want to give up eating a bowl of cereal every day, like me, then you should seriously consider checking these guys out. They have so many fantastic flavors. A lot of them remind me of like my favorite cereals growing up, watching Saturday morning cartoons after sleeping over at my friend's house because my parents would never buy the good tasting cereals. There's my favorite, of course, maple waffle, which I'm enjoying today, but blueberry muffin, cinnamon roll, cocoa, peanut butter, which I really like to mix a lot of the time, fruity, frosted, and many more. All of them are super fantastic. Oh, and also, they do cereal bars now. This is a chocolatey peanut butter one. My kids have eaten all the rest of the ones that I got, but I got one left. I'm gonna save it for later, a little afternoon snack. They taste great. They've got a lot of protein, low net carbs, a great replacement for like the granola bar or a protein bar that you might usually eat. Anyways, you guys totally check out Magic Spoon. Go to the QR code that's been sitting here this whole time, or go to magicspoon.com/D4. That way they know I sent you. And if you use the code D4 at checkout, you get $5 off your order. Don't forget, Magic Spoon, they're so confident in their product that they offer a 100% satisfaction guaranteed. If you don't like what you order for any reason, they will give you a full refund, no questions asked. So you've got nothing to lose. Try it out for yourself if you haven't. See how delicious it is. Big thanks to Magic Spoon, and let's get back to the build right after I finish my maple waffle. All right, at level 1, for our starting class, surprise, surprise, I want to go fighter. You do not have to do this, of course, but the heavy armor proficiency for starting fighter, as well as the constitution saving throw proficiency that we get, which will really help us, among other things, with our concentration checks, plus shield proficiency, right? These are all really compelling reasons to start with fighter. If we're going to get fighter levels eventually anyways, and since this is a burst damage build, of course we are, then it just makes sense to me to start with fighter here. Feel free to go a different route if you want to, that's fine. Also, let me say this, like a lot of builds that I've done on the channel, I don't know that I'd necessarily try to come up with a great story reason for all of the multiclassing that we're going to be doing on this build. There's going to be a lot. Instead, I think this is one of those where you like talk with your DM about the character and present it like you're making a bit of a custom class here. Call it the Arcane Shadow or the Spellstalker or the Spell Thief or whatever. And in order to make it work with the 5e rules, you're going to need to be a bit of a fighter, a lot of a full caster, and a splash of a couple other classes to like flesh out your vision for who and what they are and how they work, right? Anyways, for our race, I'm gonna say we gotta go Bugbear here. So ever since Mom came out, that sounds like a funny sentence out of context. Monsters of the Multiverse was released around a year ago or so. I think Bugbear is my most used race from that book. They're just so good. I mean, okay, you get an extra 5 feet of reach on melee attacks, useful if you're making melee attacks, I suppose, but then some fun and kind of weird ability to squeeze into spaces. But for the numbers, their surprise attack ability is just so phenomenal. Probably a little bit overpowered in my opinion, but I will not look a gift horse in the mouth. Now, hold on a minute, you might be saying. I thought we were a spellcaster assassin, not a weapon user. Why do we care about surprise attack? Well, you might not have realized until I actually didn't, until I double checked. that the extra 2d6 of damage that this feature gives us against enemies who have not taken a turn in combat yet doesn't just apply to weapon attacks. Just like everything that we're building for today, it simply applies to all attacks. Every attack roll that we hit with gets an extra 2d6. So this is actually the first thing that we're going to be getting to make our Nova round incredibly potent. It makes prioritizing number of attacks super important, right? The thing I kind of love most about it though, honestly, is that since it only works on enemies who haven't gone in combat yet, it really kind of forces me to just build a character that can just start firing on all cylinders right from round one in order to be an effective Nova damage dealer. And honestly, as we all probably know, generally speaking, the best time to go Nova is right on your first round of combat if you can, so that you can eliminate an enemy or two before they even get a chance to do anything, right? As for our ability scores, I'm assuming we're going the point buy method as always and say let's take a 15 intelligence plus 1 there, a 14 constitution, a 13 dexterity plus 1 there, a 13 charisma, and then I would go a 9 wisdom and take our third plus 1 there. Remember, all racial options in recent D&D history, right, come with this ability to do either a +2 in something and a +1 in something, or 3 +1s. We'd go 3 +1s here. So yeah, we are pretty dang mad here, multiple ability score dependent, and we need to fulfill a lot of minimum requirements for our various classes. Now, you could take that last +1 in charisma to make it a 14 instead of wisdom to make it 10, but honestly, I don't think we're going to need charisma all that much on this character. I think I'd rather have a 10 wisdom for perception and saving throws than a 14 charisma personally. Not that a 10 wisdom is great, but a 0 is better than a -1, right? Do what you want there. For our equipment, I'm going to say let's go the gold buy route, and we're going to start off with just scale mail, shield, and probably a heavy crossbow or a longbow. Yeah, you could get chainmail. We're a fighter, we have heavy armor proficiency, but we don't have the strength score to wear it without suffering a move speed penalty. Not a huge deal as a ranged character, but we might as well avoid that here early on, right? Since scale mail +2 from our dexterity mod is the equivalent AC as chainmail. Yeah. Once you can afford it, you're going to have to make a decision between plate armor and probably a breastplate here, right? Going plate would not only penalize our move speed, since we don't have the strength to wear it without suffering that move speed penalty, but more importantly, if I'm going to be an assassin, eventually anyways, I'm going to want to be stealthy, right? And shouldn't I then avoid armor that's going to give me disadvantage on stealth checks? Yeah, I think so. We'll discuss it as we go, but at least for these first several levels before we get to rogue, you're probably going to be fine wearing plate armor. We'll be making attacks from pretty long range, at least again for a while here, and we're not necessarily going to be trying to get surprise on our enemies. But then yes, once we do start caring more about stealth and surprise, then you're going to want to switch from plate, if you have it, to a breastplate, which is the highest AC armor that doesn't impose disadvantage on stealth checks, right? Unless of course you can find yourself some mithril plate eventually that doesn't make noise and also doesn't impose a move speed penalty if you don't have strength for us. So that's kind of a priority for us magic item wise, I think, but you'll figure it out as you go, and maybe after playing with the build in game to see if it works like you want it to, talking it over with your DM, etc. For now, go scale mail. And yeah, grab a heavy crossbow or a longbow too, just to kind of use at level 1 here until we get some spells. As a fighter 1, we get second wind, which lets us heal ourselves for a little bit, once per short rest as a bonus action. Then we get a fighting style, and I'd probably go with defense. Like I say, we're not really planning on using weapons on this build, so defense is going to bump our armor class by 1. You might want to consider getting the interception fighting style instead if you want to be a pal to your friends and help reduce damage dealt to them if you're standing next to them when they get hit, which might not actually happen all that often on this character, but something to consider. I'd probably go defense. But at level 2, with our defenses nice and solid, yes, it's time to get into what's going to make us a big Nova damage dealing stealth bomber. So first up, it's time to get some wizard levels. Yeah, wizard, I think, is the best route to take for the spells that we want, and we'll discuss. So as a wizard 1, we get arcane recovery once per day after a short rest. We get to recover spell slots equal to half our wizard level rounded up, always handy. And then yes, we get wizard spells. And I would probably just be going for the usual suspects here. I like Message cantrip for utility, especially if I might be scouting ahead for my party, which we may or may not be doing early on especially, but later probably. Toll the Dead is my favorite damage dealing cantrip, but you'll probably want a Firebolt, right? Or Ray of Frost as well. But for first level spells, yeah, Shield, Absorb Elements for defense, Mage Armor 2 if you don't want to wear heavy armor and you can't afford a breastplate, but you don't want disadvantage on your stealth checks. Hideous Laughter is great for control. Sleep is incredible very, very early, but becomes almost worthless later, right? Tasha's Mind Whip is great. Silvery Barbs, if the mob will allow it, etc., etc. At level 3, we would be a Wizard 2, and we get our Arcane Tradition, our subclass, and we are gonna go with, can you guess it? Did I give it away in the thumbnail or the preamble? I don't know because I still haven't done those yet. Why did I leave that in the script? I should have cut that out. Anyways, we are going to go with Scribe's Wizard. And I am so excited about this. I've only ever used this pretty incredible subclass one time, I think, and it was for the amazing and hilarious and admittedly a bit gimmicky Ashardalon's Strider, Greased Lightning. And I think that's it. How is that possible? This subclass is so freaking awesome. And admittedly, my friend Chris, Treant Monk, kind of inspired me with his recent videos about Scribe's Wizards, right? Watch my favorite one of the lot here. And he really helped me realize that this subclass was even better than I had thought previously. So ever since those videos came out, I've been kind of wanting to work Scribe's Wizard into another build. And yeah, I really do think that it's the best one for the concept that we're going with today. So let's get into these awesome Scribe's features. First up, we get Wizardly Quill, which is sort of just a ribbon feature, but it's potentially useful. It lets us magically summon a quill that doesn't require ink to write, can erase stuff that we write, and lets us copy spells into our spell book with way less time, which can be really nice if you're finding scrolls to copy from or another wizard spellbook, etc., right? The real gem feature here, of course, is the Awakened Spellbook feature. This makes our spellbook the bestest spellbook in the world and tells us a few things that happen while we are holding the book. First of all, we can use it as a spellcasting focus. Secondly, we can cast a ritual spell from it as a ritual, but with the spell's normal casting time instead of the usual 10 minutes. We can only do that once per day, by the way, but then best of all, when we cast a wizard spell with a spell slot, so not cantrips, right? We can alter the damage type to the damage type from another spell in our spellbook, so long as the spell that has the different damage type that we're changing it to is of the same level as what you're casting the original spell at. So, for example, if you wanted to change Fireball to Lightning Ball, you could, as a third level spell, so long as you had both Fireball and like Lightning Bolt, for example, in your spellbook, right? Now, Lightning Bolt here would not have to be prepared, you just have to know it. But if you wanted to upcast Fireball at the 4th level to get a little more damage out of it, you could not make it a Lightning Ball unless you had a 4th level wizard spell known in your book that also did lightning damage. You could, of course, change it to a 4th level Ice Ball if you had the 4th level spell Ice Storm in your spellbook though, right? Wait, why do you have Ice Storm in your spellbook? That spell sucks. Because you're a Scribe's Wizard. That's why. Because maybe you run into a group of monsters that have vulnerability to cold damage and you want to hit all of them with a 4th level AoE spell. And this, honestly, just makes the Scribe's Wizard so cool and so fun. I mean, sure, sorcerers can kind of do this with transmute spell metamagic, right? But this is way better. First of all, because transmute spell requires precious sorcery points, but also it only works on elemental magic spells to turn them into other elemental magic types, right? So fire to cold or acid to lightning or whatever. As a Scribe's Wizard, I mean, you could have Fireball do bludgeoning damage if you had black tentacles in your spellbook, right? And if nothing else, that makes for some really awesome gameplay, like theater of the mind story moments, right? What does a ball of energy that explodes in a 20-foot radius sphere of bludgeoning damage look like? I just love the variety and versatility and fun and potential power this gives us because, yeah, we're going to primarily be relying on a single spell for our Nova damage on this character, and it's one that has a damage type which is fairly often resisted in D&D 5e, so being able to change it from that damage type to something else can be super useful to overcome resistances, immunities, and also to potentially take advantage of vulnerabilities if we find enemies with vulnerabilities. They're not super common in D&D 5e, but they're there. But yes, the spell that I'm talking about here is, you guessed it, Scorching Ray, because at level 4 we would be a Wizard 3, and that means we get second level spells, and this is the most important one for us to grab. As I've talked about on the channel before, the wonderful and fairly unique thing about Scorching Ray is that unlike most damage dealing spells, you're actually making an attack roll with it, right? As opposed to requiring a saving throw. Even more unique among spells though, with the exception of just Eldritch Blast, I think, you're casting multiple rays of fire with the spell, meaning that it is absolutely perfect for someone like us who wants to be making as many attacks as possible so that we can add our Bugbear 2d6 damage to every attack, right, in our Nova round, among other things. So yes, as a second level spell, Scorching Ray fires off no fewer than 3 rays of fire, each of which are counted as a separate attack, and you can direct them all at the same enemy or split them up if you want, but best of all, it scales up to 1 more ray for every additional spell slot above second that you spend on the spell, making it, if I'm not mistaken, the best, or definitely one of the best scaling spells in the game, right? 2d6 damage per spell level, plus whatever you might be adding to an attack roll. It is perfect for us. Now, as far as the other spells that you should get here for second level spells, I mean, again, go with the usuals, Misty Step, etc., right? But make sure that you grab at least 1 or 2 that do different damage types so that you can, at the very least, avoid fire resistance if you need to. Cloud of Daggers is a great one since that does slashing damage and very few enemies are resistant to magical slashing damage. Ooh, what does a ray of slashing damage look like? Sectum Sempra! Another great alternative though, Dragon's Breath, right? That would get you acid, cold, fire, lightning, or poison damage to be able to transmute your spells into. Voila. Anyways, have fun with it. But now that we've got our bread and butter spell, we need to bolster that burst damage. That means just a teeny weeny itty bitty tiny whiny dip into Hexblade. I know, you guys are gonna kill me. That's like 3 Hexblade uses in just the last few builds, but seriously, I hadn't used Hexblade for like a year, so I'm not apologizing, but I promise not to use them again for at least like 2 or 3 months. Pinky swear. And of course, you don't have to take a Hexblade dip if you don't want to, but honestly, it is just so dang good and perfect for this build. And it's only 1 little level, and we're really only here for one thing. So yes, we're gonna be a Warlock 1 here and take Hexblade as our otherworldly patron, and we don't care about the Hex Warrior feature here that gives us medium armor and shield proficiency. We already had that. Nor do we care about being able to attack with our Charisma modifier. Weapons are dumb. Charisma is stupid. We are an intelligent nerd. We don't care about our personality. We just got a 13 Charisma because we had to. All we care about is that glorious, lovely, delicious Hexblade's Curse, because it lets us, as a bonus action, once per short rest, curse an enemy so that they take additional damage equal to our proficiency bonus, not with every weapon attack, heck, not even with an attack, but quite simply whenever we roll damage. And with Scorching Ray, we would be rolling damage 3 times, so that adds up really quickly. Also, if and when the target dies, and die they shall, we regain hit points equal to our Warlock level plus our Charisma modifier, so 2. And that's never going to get better. So we don't care too much about that. But anyways, we get Warlock spells here, and I would grab the unique to Warlock ones, I think. Armor of Agathis is fun for some temporary hit points and to return damage to melee attackers. And Hex is pretty good for those of us making a lot of attacks on a turn, but yeah, it's problematic. As you no doubt know, you cast it as a bonus action, it requires concentration, and it adds an extra d6 of damage to every hit that you make. That's awesome, but the thing is, we've got to remember the rules on spell casting here. If you cast a spell with a bonus action, the only other spells you can cast that turn are cantrips. So if we wanted to use Hex, then we couldn't Scorching Ray until round 2, right? And that's problematic because we care about making attacks on our first round because we are a Bugbear. Because we get a lot more out of the Bugbear's surprise attack by making our attacks on the first round, 2d6, than we would out of Hex, 1d6. Now, some tables might allow, once in a while, for you to, like, sense that a fight is coming and throw out Hex on an enemy, and then we roll initiative, right? I think the intent of the rules as they're written is to not allow for that. So like if you say, I cast Hex on an enemy, your DM is probably going to say, well, okay, everybody roll initiative, and then you'll do that when it's your turn, right? So in that case, sure, maybe save Hex for a boss that you think you're going to be making lots of attacks against, right? And you could use that like on round 2 to keep pummeling them for damage, but I'm not going to assume that we're using Hex for our Nova round. And yeah, this sort of highlights the really great thing about Hexblade's Curse, right? It's very specifically not a spell. So there's no reason that we couldn't just throw this on our enemy and then start blasting right on round 1. But okay, with Hexblade's Curse secure, as badly as we'd like to go do other things, at level 6, we've got to go back to Fighter because Action Surge is just sitting right there. And we definitely want it. We've got a damage report coming up. So yes, Fighter 2 here, we'd get Action Surge, and that would let us, on our Nova round, cast Scorching Ray twice, once per short rest at least, and that means 6 beams of fire damage, or slashing, or acid, or kind of whatever you want, actually. Man, I love Scribes Wizards. And when you're adding 2d6 damage and your proficiency bonus to every single one of those attacks, that's insane. So yes, level 6, time for our first damage report. Let's discuss what combat looks like for us here. It's almost barbarian-esque in its simplicity. On round 1, pick an enemy who hasn't gone in combat yet, hit them with Hexblade's Curse, cast Scorching Ray, Action Surge, cast Scorching Ray again. If everything hits, we're going to be doing 6 rays of damage that each hit for 2d6 for the spell, plus 2d6 for surprise attack, plus 3 for our proficiency bonus from Hexblade's Curse. That's a grand total of 24d6 plus 18, with a 10% crit chance, no less, at level 6. Yikes. And so, against an enemy here with a 10 armor class, we would on average do 95 damage here, and against an enemy with a 15 armor class, that would be 70 damage during our Nova round. We almost broke the Centennial Barrier at level 6. And frankly, we will, right? Sometimes. I mean, this was an average. Ay caramba. I mean, that is just blowing every other build that I've ever done for Nova right out of the water at this level, damage-wise. Except for that stupid Conjure Animals, stupid Shepherd Druid build. I hate that spell! I'm so glad they're changing it for 1D&D. And I mean, we're talking no setup required. No, this only works if XYZ conditions are met, right? It just smacks. I love it. But boy, oh boy, are there places to go and things to see still for this build, so let's get to it. Because at level 7, we are finally taking rogue levels. Yeah, I know. I want to scale my spell slots too, but you know what's even better than more Scorching Ray blasts? Advantage on our attacks and automatic critical hits. So that's what we're going for. Now, yes, like I said, you could have started Rogue if you wanted to for thematic or character concept purposes. If you got to Assassin 3, Wizard 3 here by level 6, right, you could still stealthily get in a single Scorching Ray with each one of them automatically critting against a surprised enemy anyways, and that's pretty comparable damage-wise for a Nova round. We would miss the Hexblade's Curse damage. It's only about 10% less damage than the way that we've built it, right? And yeah, would let us start with 3 levels of Rogue, if that plays more into your character concept, or if your party really needs a scouty lockpicker, right? That said, it does only get close damage-wise if the enemy is surprised, which is never a guarantee, right? So yes, for those of us beholden to the spreadsheets, I'm sticking with the build as I've laid it out thus far. Feel free to switch it up if you want to. But regardless, at this point, yes, we've finally arrived at Rogue 1. That means we get Thieves' Cant, the special coded language that those who can interpret it can use to send special coded messages to one another, right? And then we get Expertise, which will potentially be super important for us. It lets us pick 2 skills that we are proficient in, or 1 skill and our Thieves' tools, and then double the proficiency bonus for them. I'd definitely go Stealth for 1 here. And by the way, if you didn't get Stealth proficiency with your background at character creation, make sure you grab it here. When you multiclass into Rogue, you do get a free skill proficiency. So yeah, that's nice. But then I think for the second one, I would grab either Perception, always handy, or maybe Thieves' Tools if you are suddenly going to be the party's Trap Disarmer and Lockpicker, right? We also get Sneak Attack here, but I'm not even going to go over it because perhaps for the first time ever, I'm using rogue levels, but I'm not going to benefit at all from sneak attack. It's too bad we can't consider Scorching Ray to be like a finesse weapon. Maybe you can convince your DM to allow it if you change the damage type to slashing or piercing. I doubt it. At level 8, we would be a rogue 2. That means we get cunning action. That's super fantastic. It lets us use a bonus action to hide, disengage, or dash. Always useful. And then at level 9, we would be a rogue 3. And that means we get our roguish archetype, our rogue subclass. And yes, as I've said, we are going assassin because assassins get the Assassinate feature, which tells us, yes, as we've discussed, that when we make an attack against an enemy who has not gone in combat yet, we have advantage on the attack. And when we make a hit against a surprised enemy, it's automatically a critical hit, which means that we would be doubling all of the dice that we roll, including from Scorching Ray, Surprise Attack, and even other things that we might be adding later. I haven't done this for a while, but I feel like I need to go into the nitty-gritty of how stealth works in 5e, because it can be a little wonky, it's not super intuitive, and I think a lot of people get it wrong, or at least don't quite understand how the rules say it's supposed to work. Me included, honestly. I've been guilty of this in the past for much of my D&D 5e career. So, if you're trying to go unnoticed, you make a stealth check. For an enemy to see you, their passive perception has to be higher than your stealth check. The question that the books don't really discuss, though, is at what distance does a character's passive perception stop working? At 30 feet? 50 feet? 100 feet? Does it matter how well lit the space is? Does it matter if there's like carpet or if it's an echoey cave? These are all things for your DM to determine, and this really matters because Scorching Ray has a distance of 120 feet. I mean, I guess if you can see them to hit them with this spell, they can potentially see you, right? So you'd probably need to be stealthy at least to the point at which you are going to be trying to hit them, if not even further out. Unless, of course, you're in the dark and they're standing around a fire or whatever. Maybe they have their backs turned towards you. Again, a lot of this is up to the DM and up to the situation, so you 100% for sure want to be talking this over with them before you try and bring this character to their table, as you should do with every character, of course. Anyways, yeah, it's now more important than ever to try and get the drop on your enemies, so if you don't have mithril plate armor, ditch that plate for a breastplate if you haven't done so yet. Anyways, still talking about stealth rules here. Assuming that you do get the drop on your enemies and try to go Nova on them while unnoticed, here's how it works. If an enemy is surprised, that means they didn't know you were there before you tried to hurt them. They can't move or take an action until their turn ends, at which point, I think it's implied, the surprised status ends for them. Feel free to argue about this in the comments if you'd like, but I think it's pretty clear. Most seem to agree. Like, there's no surprise round. So if you want to make your attacks before you even make that first attack roll, everybody rolls initiative, right? So you're attacking from stealth, but you don't get like a free attack on them. You say, I'm going to cast Hexblade's Curse on them. And your DM will say, okay, let's roll initiative. And let's say enemy A rolls an 18, you roll a 15, and enemy B rolls a 12. Enemy A then goes first. They're surprised. As such, they can't do anything, their turn ends, but now they're not surprised anymore, and they have taken a turn in combat, right? Now it's your turn. You could make your attacks against enemy A, but since they're not surprised, they've already had a turn, and you're an assassin and a bugbear, you decide to make your attacks against enemy B, who hasn't gone yet, and is therefore still surprised, so that you can make them with advantage, and you auto-crit, and you add 2d6 for surprise attack, or actually 4d6, since it's gonna crit, to each hit, right? Right. So, again, it's not like you make your attacks and then everyone rolls initiative, though that is often how we've played it at my table, and I'm sure many of you do the same. And I think that's actually how it's handled in Baldur's Gate 3. Take a drink. Okay, makes sense. And yeah, this is why trying to use Hex doesn't really work, because if you spend your first turn hexing, then you can't Scorching Ray, and next round, nobody's surprised, and everyone's had a turn in combat. I mean, I guess you could try to argue that you could hex someone from stealth without them noticing, then you wait 6 seconds and open fire. I have to believe that most DMs would say no. You hex them, they can feel the spell's effect settle in on them, and they become alert to danger or something, but maybe not. It doesn't necessarily say that that happens in the spell description, right? They're not like covered in light or anything. Again, feel free to argue about it in the comments. Yay, algorithm. Okay. With everything clear as mud, it's time for our next damage report. Since last check, we've simply added 3 levels of Assassin Rogue, and in addition to picking up some nice utility, we've simply added advantage and auto crits to all of our attacks during our Nova round. Yes, this now assumes that the enemy is surprised. No, there's no guarantee that you're going to get surprised when you want it, so yeah, that means sometimes the numbers I'm about to give you will be accurate, and sometimes they won't. If you don't love the idea of being at the mercy of your DM, the particular combat encounter, your stealth check, and your fellow players who may or may not want to Leroy Jenkins every single fight, curse you, Thornock! Then feel free to skip Assassin altogether and just go back to Wizard for more and better spell slots and more Scorching Ray blasts. But if you want to lean into being an Assassin Mage, which was kind of the whole concept for this video in the first place, right? Then yeah, when you do get that surprise, it is going to be spectacular. At this point though, yes, I'm going to assume that all of our attacks are made with advantage and are becoming automatic critical hits. And thus, against an enemy with a 10 armor class, we would on average do 190 damage during our Nova round. And against an enemy with a 16 armor class, we would do 161 damage on average during our burst round. Criminy. Again, compared to other Nova damage builds that I've done to date, that's still upper half of tier 1, but now, of course, we have that big, humongous caveat that it only works if they're surprised. Not the first time I've made this assumption using Assassin, so I really don't feel at all bad about it. But yeah, it is very important to note. Again, if you want to skip Assassin and just go with more Wizard, you'll be great. Basically, significantly less damage when they're surprised and significantly more when they're not. Still solid. But at level 10, now that we have finally kind of gotten everything else in place, yes, it's time to feed that Scorching Ray beast and make it as big as we can. So we're going back to Wizard. This means as a Wizard 4, we'd get an ability score increase or feat. And yeah, I'm probably going to bump my intelligence to 18. It's painful to have to suffer along with a 16 all this time. We could have gotten to intelligence 18 sooner, but the numbers just looked better with advantage and crits from Assassin 3 at level 9 than they did with +1 more intelligence, right? No question. But one thing I do need to discuss at some point in this build here is this. As we've talked about, going before at least one other enemy in combat is incredibly important for this character. So important that you might want to grab like the alert feat here, right? Or consider taking War or Chronergy for your subclass instead of Scribe's Wizard, as those subclasses get to add their intelligence modifier to their initiative rolls. I'd hate to give up on the damage swapping from Scribes. There are plenty of enemies in D&D 5e that are resistant to fire damage, sometimes immune even. But it really might be worth it, and you could just kind of muddle through fire resistance when you run into it, or maybe take the Elemental Adept feat later on, or even the Metamagic Adept feat to try and get around fire resistance, right? I mean, we only have a +2 to our dexterity, so our initiative rolls are not amazing. That said, I feel fairly confident that just about every fight where you can get surprised, there will be at least one enemy who rolls lower than you for initiative. But definitely feel free to make adjustments to better shore up your initiative rolls if you feel otherwise. Having to wait 4 more levels to get that intelligence up to 18 hurts, but it's not the worst thing in the world. At level 11, we would be a Wizard 5, and that means we get 3rd level spells. And while yes, this of course means Counterspell and Fireball and Flight and Hypnotic Pattern and Fear, the only one I'm going to mention here as a possible consideration for us on our Nova round is, yeah, the oft maligned but still one of my favorites, Spirit Shroud. So while I think most DMs would probably say that casting Hex on an enemy initiates combat, the beautiful thing about Spirit Shroud, of course, is that it is cast on you. Now, it only lasts for a minute, and it does have a verbal component, so I think there's still some question here on whether or not you could cast it, get into position, and make your attacks before it wears off. It's going to depend on where the enemies are located, how dark it is, how noisy it is, how far away you have to be able to cast a spell on yourself and then move stealthily into combat range. And while sure, you could sort of get into position first, cast the spell on yourself, wait 6 seconds until next turn, and then make attacks, right, initiating combat, that extra d8 of damage that Spirit Shroud grants on every attack, and yes, it's just an attack that's required, not a weapon attack, it requires us to be within 10 feet in order to benefit from that d8, so this potentially really changes things for us. If we want to take advantage of it, it means no more 120-foot range on Scorching Ray, and if we're casting a spell, Spirit Shroud, within 10 feet of an enemy, I mean, can we whisper the verbal component? Again, all things to discuss with your DM. Just for fun, I'm going to assume that we've got Spirit Shroud going on our Nova round. I suppose the most likely scenario being that we cast it on ourselves when we're like pretty far away from our targets, right? With a bonus action, and then we're like moving and dashing until we can sneakily get within 10 feet before unloading. That probably means we're going to be losing a round or two off of our Spirit Shroud, so now it's only going to last, say, 8 more rounds, right, before it expires. But how many combat encounters in D&D 5e go 8 rounds? Very few. Anyways, one nice thing about Spirit Shroud is that the damage can be radiant, necrotic, or cold, which gives us 3 additional options for Scorching Ray to change the damage type to for Scorching Ray, right? Or other spells for that matter. We don't just have to cast Scorching Ray all the time every round. Even if we didn't take any other damaging spells at level 3, that's a nice little cadre of options, right? But feel free to grab anything else that you might want in the name of altering damage type on your rays. Tidal Wave does bludgeoning damage. That's a great one. Anyways, at level 12, we would be a Wizard 6. And this is like a very juicy level for us that I really wish I could have gotten to sooner, because as a Scribe's Wizard, we get the Manifest Mind feature. And this ability is just so cool. It's the one thing I really didn't appreciate until Chris's video that I linked to earlier, where he dove really deep on it. And by the way, if for no other reason, you should absolutely watch those videos for the humor alone. Chris was in rare form, top notch. I kept laughing really loudly while listening to it at the gym the other day, actually. People kept giving me funny looks. But yeah, Manifest Mind, fantastic. It tells us that we can use a bonus action to conjure forth the mind of our awakened spellbook. It appears as a tiny book or a text or scholar. It sheds dim light in a 10-foot radius, but is otherwise intangible. It doesn't occupy its space, it has no stat block, and as such, it can't be killed or anything. You can only get rid of it with a Dispel Magic spell, or by destroying your spellbook, or killing you, or if you dismiss it or use it again, right? Now, the mind can telepathically share what it sees and hears with you, and unlike Find Familiar, it doesn't incapacitate or blind you or anything while doing so. It's just like you have a second set of eyes and ears at all times that can't easily be destroyed. That alone is pretty invaluable. You can have it move as a bonus action up to 30 feet, and it can hover, right? And when you first summon it with your bonus action, you can summon it anywhere within 60 feet of you. Yes, even through walls, around corners, etc. So it's incredible for scouting. Best of all, proficiency bonus times per day. When you cast a spell, you can cast it from the mind's location instead of your own. So what does all of this mean for our assassin mage? Well, in addition to all of the crazy awesome stuff that any Scribe's Wizard could do with it, and I'm not going to really get into all of it, seriously, watch that Treant Monk video. It's really good and lots of cool, fun ideas. But yeah, scouting, killing, controlling enemies without fear of retaliation, etc., etc. In addition to that, I'm wondering if you could stealth in with your manifested mind to make surprise attacks. As always, it's going to depend on your DM. First of all, with no stat block, they have no stealth score, so can they stealth? Rules as written, probably not. But I can see a DM letting the manifested mind like use your stealth score, or I even read about one house rule that allowed your intelligence modifier for a stealth check for the manifested mind. Of course, they do shed dim light, so how sneaky can they really be? I mean, I guess it depends. Are the enemies' backs towards you? Are you in a well-lit area anyways with lots of distractions so you could still conceivably stealth? Could they hover like up into the air above them and thus avoid notice? I'm mostly curious because it could potentially allow for some fun shenanigans, but it's by no means necessary to the build. In fact, you couldn't use Hexblade's Curse from the mind's position, because that's not a spell, right? And arguably, Spirit Shroud wouldn't actually apply extra damage here if cast from the spell's location, because whether the mind casts Spirit Shroud from its position or you cast it from your own, the spell specifically affects you and attacks you make. I mean, I guess you could argue that you are making attacks when you Scorching Ray from the mind's position. It's just you casting the spell from over there instead. So maybe Spirit Shroud still works. It's something to talk about with your DM. Anyway, the point is, it's messy, and if you wanted to try and do it for fun, discuss with your dungeon master. And or please in the comments below. At level 13, we would be a wizard 7, and that means we get 4th level spells, and I'm just gonna say PYF here, pick your favorite. Of course, picking up the usuals, right? Polymorph, banishment, black tentacles, but keep an eye on what kind of spells you might want to use to change the damage type of Scorching Ray too. Black tentacles does bludgeoning. But at level 13, it's time for our next damage report. Since last check, the biggest change for us, tactically, is that we're now potentially adding a d8 of damage to all of our attacks via Spirit Shroud. Again, you may or may not want to be able to try and make this work, but I'm assuming that you are. And then, as a 7th level full caster, we can upcast Scorching Ray, if we wanted to a 4th level spell slot for one casting and a 3rd level spell slot for another, giving us 9 rays that each add all kinds of delicious damage to them now. We've also increased our intelligence modifier by 1 and added a lot of great utility and control and AoE damage options via spells as well. And so, at this level, against an enemy with a 10 armor class, we would on average do 377 damage during our Nova round, and against an enemy with a 17 AC, it would be 332 damage. Wait, what? That can't be right. Yeah, that's right. And that means, at this level anyway, we're beating out even that piece of crap Shepherd Druid. Never had so much animosity towards a build. Yes! We're even beating the Critlander when they were fighting humanoids. Incredible. Now, yes, of course, it only works on surprised enemies, but still, amazing. Oh, and you're mostly a wizard now too, by the way, so that's awesome. Anyways, at level 14, we would be a wizard 8, and that means we get another ability score increase or feat, and I'm gonna say we're bumping intelligence, capping it finally at 20, with the same caveat as last time. You might want to get alert instead. At level 15, we would be a wizard 9, and that means we get 5th level spells, and as crazy as it sounds to say it, pick your favorites. I mean, yeah, you should get Wall of Force and animate objects and maybe other things. We're still better off concentrating on Spirit Shroud if you can make it work, since especially as a 5th level spell, it's now going to do an extra 2d8 of damage per attack. And don't forget, if we're automatically critting on our Nova round, that's 4d8 of damage on every single Scorching Ray beam. Just don't forget to grab like some important 5th level spells for damage types here. Synaptic Static is great in its own right and does psychic damage. Steel Wind Strike and Bigby's Hand can do Force, maybe Dawn for Radiant. At level 16, we would be a wizard 10, and that means we get as a scribe's wizard Master Scrivener, and this is a fun ability. It lets us make scrolls and make them more easily than other characters. For the most part, we're talking about making a 1st or 2nd level scroll from your spellbook with a casting time of 1 action. When you do this, only you can cast it, and it vanishes when you use the scroll or take a long rest. So I kind of think of it like another 1st or 2nd level spell slot per day, which isn't a bad thing at all. Maybe emphasize things that you would want in a pinch, but you might not necessarily need to be casting in the middle of combat, right? Also, when you cast the spell from the scroll in this way, it treats it as though it were cast 1 level higher. I mean, you could do a Scorching Ray scroll, I suppose, if you really just wanted to get as many Scorching Rays as possible. You should probably do it for something more useful. But at level 17, we would be a wizard 7, and that means we get 6th level spells, and again, you know, PYF, but of course, have fun with contingency. Maybe you could have contingency be when I make an attack against a surprised enemy, cast Spirit Shroud as a 5th level spell, something like that. Or yeah, I mean, Mass Suggestion, of course, but Disintegrate does force damage, Sunbeam does Radiant, so I might look to grab at least one of those. But for our final damage report. Since last check, we have capped our intelligence, we've added loads of potential control and utility and things via spells, but most importantly, for damage, given ourselves the ability to cast Scorching Ray as a 6th level spell once, and then a 5th level spell for the 2nd Action Surge version, right? If we were foolish enough to use those spell slots for Scorching Ray, as well as Spirit Shroud for that other 5th level spell slot, potentially, bringing our total number of rays to 13 on our Nova round with Action Surge, each adding 6 for our proficiency bonus from Hexblade's Curse, 2d6 from Bugbear, 2d8 from Spirit Shroud, with all of the dice critting on a hit, assuming a surprised enemy, for a grand total of 52d6 plus 26d8 plus 78 damage on our Nova round. Giddy up. Under that assumption, against an enemy with a 10 armor class, we would be doing 674 damage on average, and against an enemy with an 18, it would be 615 damage on average. We've broken the sextuple centennial barrier. I don't even know what to call that. So yeah, that's insane. And is more Nova damage than any character I've ever built by like a million miles. No one else has even broken 500 on average, right, before at any enemy armor class. And we have 6th level wizard spells. Admittedly, I just said that I'd be using it on Scorching Ray to get this much damage, but you, of course, may just scale it back to a couple of 4th level spell slots for Scorching Ray. It still destroy everything, and then now you can cast Mass Suggestion or something, right? So, yes, it's all a little heady. Let's break it down in the final thoughts. The tier score for this build, if you just take the damage that they do at every armor class that we calculate for at each of the 4 damage reports and just average them all into one big number, we end up with a 272. And yes, that means, ladies and gentlemen, we have a new sheriff in town for top spot of the Nova damage tier ranking charts, beating out the previous frontrunner by more than 10%. And while sure, we are assuming, at least most of the time here, that we're making attacks against a surprise enemy, which is a huge assumption. The previous champion, the Assassin's Creed, was assuming the same thing. And the second place contender, the Critlander, was assuming a humanoid enemy, which might be an even bigger assumption, right? So yeah, that's some insane damage. And yeah, it's got some big caveats. Not only are you only hitting this hard against surprised enemies, but you're also only doing it against enemies who you beat in initiative. We still only have a +2 dexterity bonus, right? So yeah, definitely consider taking the alert feat sooner rather than later, like I've talked about, and even consider also taking a different wizard subclass if you want to, but in which case, you know, be sure to grab either Elemental Adept or some meta magic to avoid fire resistance and or immunity, right? But here's the thing. Even if we weren't attacking a surprised enemy, so long as we were attacking an enemy who hadn't gone in combat yet, which isn't too much of a stretch, at level 17, we'd still be doing around 400 damage in a Nova round if we blew our best spell slots for it. So what, instead of one-shotting an ancient blue dragon, you could only one-shot an ancient black dragon. What a crap character. Now, the ancient black dragon might beat us in initiative more reliably, but still, we're still beating out almost every other Nova build that I've ever done. And I'm just not sure if I'll ever be able to do a build for 5e that can outpace this much burst damage. But you know what the best thing about this build is? I mean, not only are we doing insane levels of damage, potentially, but you're also a freaking wizard. And the great thing about building wizards who can burst hard is that once their burst round is over, you can go back to doing the thing that wizards do best, controlling the battlefield, right? So yeah, blow up an enemy, or maybe even 2 or 3, honestly, at the beginning of combat. Then on round 2, web or hypnotic pattern or wall of force most of the rest of the enemies, and you're basically winning combat encounters by yourself. Sure, you'd be blowing lots of spell slots doing all of that, no question, but I think at most tables, and especially for the most important fights, you would feel like a god with this build. Assassin levels are not, and when you couple it all with those sneaky utility-focused rogue levels, it just feels to me like there's nothing this stealth bomber can't do. Except heal their allies, I suppose. Actually, you know what? Take life transference. That is the build for the week. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. I had a blast, oh boy, with this one. So much fun. But I hope that you know how much I love you, because I do. Thank you for all that you do for me, for the channel. I hope that you have a really great day and a fantastic week. And if you don't, please hang in there. You got this. I hope that you will be kind and do good, and that I see you again very soon. But until then, take care. Bye. When all the little ants are marching, red and black antenna waving, they all do it the same. They all do it the same way. Hey, Candyman tempted by thoughts of a sweet tooth, tortured by weight loss. Programmer cutting the corners of loose end, cut on the fence, cannot to offend. Cut. Take these chances, place them in a box until a quieter time lights down you up, and I Favorite Dave Matthews Band song? Ants Marching? Might be. There's a lot of good ones though, seriously. I mean, Grey Street, I love. Might be, what's the one off their second album? Lie in Our Graves. That's the one I was trying to think of. Tripping Billies. I mean, there's so many good ones. Cry Freedom. Anyway, what's yours? And don't be a hater. They're super talented. Amazingly talented band. All right. Okay. Welcome to the Red Dragon Lodge, known for its steaks and also really fantastic barbecue by an open fire. Telling you, these shirts from Obvious Mimic are awesome. I love them. Even though it might be a little bit shiny for the lighting here. All right. What's the one word I can say with a Scottish accent? Right. Is that balanced center? Feels a little off. So like, check the bubble. There. To adjust all my pictures. Now they're gonna look slightly off. Camera has a serious like fisheye thing going, and sometimes makes everything look slanted. Yeah, that's good. And even if you, oh no, wait, don't say that. Which is still, they could potentially see you, right? They could honking horns, slamming doors. Need to make changes to notes. La 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 la. Ma me me mo moo. Come on, Mike. Ooh-wee.